What would it feel like to fall asleep in a city full of life and wake up to nothing? Not ruins formed over centuries, not slow decay, but sudden silence. Streets once busy with footsteps left empty. Meals abandoned. Doors left open. Lamps burned out with no one left to relight them. Across history, there are moments when entire civilizations seem to disappear almost overnight, leaving behind places where life simply stopped. What makes these places unsettling is not destruction, but interruption. Time didn't move forward, it paused. Homes remain as they were. Tools lie where hands last touched them. Cities feel less like ruins and more like unfinished sentences. No final words. No clear warnings. We like to believe civilizations fall slowly, but history tells a quieter, more disturbing truth. Sometimes the end comes without drama, without witnesses, without explanation, and long after the people are gone, the silence they leave behind still asks the same question. How can a world vanish while it's still alive? Tonight, we step into those silences. In the quiet hours of the night, when modern noise softens and the world finally exhales, our minds often drift toward the echoes of things long gone. History, stretched across millennia, usually moves slowly. Cities rise, grow, and age in rhythms that take generations to unfold. But scattered through the timeline of human existence are rare moments when entire civilizations seem to vanish in a single night, slipping from presence into silence so abruptly that even centuries later, we struggle to understand what truly happened. This opening section invites the listener into that space between certainty and mystery, where the lines of fact and legend blur gently like distant lights fading behind a veil of fog. We begin by imagining the pulse of ancient life as it once was. Markets bustling beside sunlit courtyards, fishing boats returning at dusk, families gathering beneath lamplit doorways. The warmth of human presence is vivid and familiar. And yet, in the next breath, we picture those same streets empty, bowls abandoned mid-meal, fires still glowing faintly in deserted hearths, tools left waiting for hands that never return. In this contrast between vivid life and sudden stillness, the seed of curiosity begins to unfurl. How can an entire culture, with its rituals, languages, and dreams, simply dissolve into the shadows without warning? The truth behind these disappearances are varied. Some involve natural disasters so swift and violent that cities were consumed almost instantly, leaving behind ruins frozen in time. Others may have stemmed from choices, quiet migrations, political upheaval, spiritual shifts, changes that unfolded quickly enough to be remembered as overnight vanishing acts. And some stories fall between myth and memory, where the facts are softened by centuries of retelling, creating legends that whisper to us across oceans of time. As we drift deeper into these narratives, it becomes clear that the line between historical event and mystical imagination is far more delicate than it seems. This documentary's journey is not one of sensational fear or dramatic catastrophe. Instead, it is an exploration meant to be listened to in calm moments, when a mind is open and the heart is settled. The tone is gentle, inviting you to wander through ancient corridors with steady steps, noticing the quiet clues left behind by civilizations that once thrived. We linger not on destruction, but on the poetry of absence, the way nature slowly reclaims stone, the way water embraces forgotten harbors, the way stories survive long after voices fall silent. Through this softened lens, each disappearance becomes less a tragedy and more a mystery suspended in time. As the narrative unfolds, we will travel from sunken cities to desert cliffs, from jungle temples to icy frontiers. Along the way, we will encounter mysteries shaped by water, fire, migration, and cosmic phenomena. Each chapter adds another layer to the understanding that human existence, however grand, is fragile and fleeting. Yet in that fragility lies beauty, the reminder that every moment, every structure, every idea we create is part of a vast and interconnected tapestry, vulnerable to the shifting whims of the earth and sky. To guide you gently into the first mystery, we start not with myth, but with a place that truly existed. An ancient port city once alive with trade and ritual, now resting quietly beneath the waves. Its story is a bridge between what we know and what we sense, between the certainty of archaeological evidence and the mystery of a sudden, watery descent. From this point onward, the world of the vanished begins to open, revealing the first chapter of our journey into civilizations that disappeared as though swallowed by the night. Long before it became a whisper beneath the Mediterranean, Thonis Heraclean stood as one of the most important gateways into ancient Egypt. Ships from Greece, Phoenicia, and beyond glided into its harbors, carrying exotic goods, sacred offerings, and travelers eager to step onto the threshold of one of the world's greatest civilizations. At its height, the city shimmered with movement, priests conducting ceremonies in towering temples, merchants shouting prices across busy docks, and sailors celebrating their safe arrival after long voyages at sea. The port was a living pulse of cultural exchange, trade, and spiritual significance. Archaeologists believe that for centuries, this city, known as Thonis to the Egyptians and Heraclean to the Greeks, was the maritime lifeline to the Nile Delta. It served not just as a trading hub, but also as a ritual center, home to shrines dedicated to gods associated with navigation, fertility, and protection. Massive statues of pharaohs and deities watched over the waters, their reflections trembling gently on the surface as ships passed between them. The city's architecture reflected both Egyptian sanctity and Greek admiration, creating a harmonious blend of artistic and cultural influences. Life here was vibrant, present, and deeply intertwined with the rhythm of the sea. And yet, despite its importance, Thonis Heraclean vanished with such silence and completeness that for centuries, people debated whether it had existed at all. For a long time, the once thriving city became little more than a legend mentioned in scattered texts, a half-remembered place whose presence faded like a story told too long after dark. Historians suspected it had been destroyed, but no ruins appeared on land to confirm its fate. The city, it seemed, had not simply fallen, it had disappeared. One moment it stood tall at Egypt's frontier, and the next it was gone, leaving behind almost no trace. It wasn't until the year 2000 that the mystery began to unravel. Underwater archaeologist Frank Gaudio and his team discovered colossal statues, temple fragments, and ancient canals lying beneath layers of sand and silt preserved in the Mediterranean Sea. These ruins did not speak of gradual decay. Instead, they suggested something far more abrupt. Structures swallowed whole, streets lost in an instant, and monumental stones toppled as though the ground itself had liquefied beneath them. Here, finally, was Thonis Heraclean, resting quietly below the waves like a city caught between memory and oblivion. The evidence pointed toward a powerful geological event. The Nile Delta, though fertile and life-giving, rests upon soft, unstable ground composed of water-soaked sediments. When a strong earthquake strikes such a place, the soil can lose its stability and behave like a liquid, a rare but devastating phenomenon known as soil liquefaction. Temples, houses, and statues that once stood firm would have suddenly lost all support, slipping downward as though the earth beneath them opened its arms and pulled them into the depths. For the people who lived there, the transformation would have been instantaneous and terrifying. Imagine the city at night. Lanterns swaying softly in the breeze, prayers echoing across stone courtyards, fishermen dozing beside unloaded cargo. Then, without warning, the ground trembles. The earth shakes with a deep, groaning sound, and stone columns shudder. Water rushes in with uncanny speed, rising over ankles, then knees, then chests. Buildings tilt and collapse. Boats break their moorings and glide into dark, swirling currents. And as the sea claims the land, the city that once welcomed countless voyagers becomes an underwater tomb. Such an image bridges the distance between calm historical reflection and the dramatic, breathtaking reality of sudden destruction. Yet even here, mystery lingers. The exact combination of forces that brought Thonis Heraclean down is still debated. Some researchers suggest a series of earthquakes weakened its foundations over years. Others argue that a massive surge of water, perhaps from a tsunami, dealt the final blow. Ancient writings hint at divine punishment, as disasters were often interpreted as messages from the gods displeased by human arrogance or neglecting sacred duties. Whether mythic or scientific, these explanations coexist like intertwined currents, offering multiple tones of understanding without resolving the enigma completely. What remains remarkable is how well the sea preserved the city. Unlike ruins left to sun and wind, Thonis Heraclean's underwater home shielded it from erosion. Wooden ships, gold jewelry, ritual objects, and even delicate papyri were found astonishingly intact. They now serve as time capsules, whispering of a world that thrived above the waves but now rests peacefully beneath them. In the soft glow of underwater lights, divers have described the city as dreamlike. Monuments suspended in blue stillness, statues of kings standing patiently in a realm without breath or wind. As we explore this lost port, the contrast becomes clear. A city once filled with voices now lies in near-perfect silence, a silence so complete that it feels almost sacred. The sea, in its quiet hunger, transformed a bustling metropolis into an underwater sanctuary. The mystery of its sudden disappearance invites us not only to imagine what happened, but to reflect on the delicate line between security and disaster, presence and memory, land and water. Thonis Heraclean's story is the first thread in this tapestry of vanished civilizations, setting the tone for the mysteries that follow. And as we rise from its submerged avenues, we drift naturally into the next reflection: how the sea has swallowed many more cities, each with its own quiet tale of overnight transformation. The sea has always been both a giver and a taker, a gentle cradle of life and a silent architect of sudden endings. As we leave the submerged avenues of Thonis Heraclean behind, it becomes clear that the ocean's embrace is not unique to that ancient port. Across the world, coastlines have shifted, land is fractured, and entire settlements have slipped beneath waves without warning. In this gentle bridge between stories, we pause to drift along the boundary where land meets water, exploring how the sea, calm on the surface, can hide unimaginable power beneath. Picture a quiet shoreline at dusk. Waves roll in with the same steady rhythm they have followed for thousands of years. Families once walked those shores. Children chased one another between the palms, and fishermen mended nets by lantern light. Yet history shows us that beneath this soothing rhythm lies an unpredictable force. When the earth trembles, when storms swell, or when pressure builds far out at sea, the quiet becomes a gateway to catastrophe. Entire cities have been claimed not over decades, but in a single storm or a single trembling night, leaving behind only legends of what once stood along the water's edge. The sea does not always roar when it takes. Sometimes it simply rises. A subtle, gradual shift in the earth beneath a coastal settlement can weaken its foundations without any warning. What begins as a slight tilt in a stone pillar may end with streets filled by a creeping tide that does not recede. Ancient people often interpreted such events as signs of divine displeasure or omens of cosmic imbalance. In some tales, gods opened the seas to swallow the pride of humanity. In others, the waters simply reclaimed what had always belonged to them. These myths, colored by awe and fear, mirror the scientific explanations we study today. Tectonic shifts, land subsidence, soil liquefaction, and tidal surges amplified by faraway forces. For civilizations that lived in harmony with the ocean, this danger was especially profound. Ports, fishing towns, maritime trade centers, these were the lifelines of ancient societies. They thrived because of their proximity to the water, Yet that same closeness made them vulnerable to sudden disappearance. A great wave could sweep across a coastline in minutes, carrying away buildings, people, and entire histories. A storm surge could turn familiar harbors into chaotic whirlpools. A small shift in river channels could drown fields and marketplaces. The sea's appetite, though slow over centuries, could also be swift and absolute in a single night. Stories from around the world echo similar themes. In Southeast Asia, tales describe ancient island kingdoms swallowed by vast floods. In Northern Europe, legends tell of entire villages that slipped beneath the sea during fierce storms, their church bells said to ring faintly from underwater on quiet nights. Off the coasts of India and Japan, divers have discovered stone structures and submerged walkways hinting at once thriving cultures now muted beneath layers of silt. Though these accounts span different continents, they carry the same gentle warning. The line between thriving civilization and underwater ruin is finer than we often imagine. Yet there is beauty in this quiet hunger, too. When the sea takes, it sometimes preserves. Submerged ruins often emerge centuries later in remarkable condition, as if time paused the moment they touched the water. Stone carvings remain crisp, pottery rests unbroken, and whole neighborhoods lie undisturbed like silent memories held close by the ocean's hands. The sea does not always destroy. Sometimes, it simply keeps secrets until the world is ready to rediscover them. This duality, devourer and guardian, makes water one of history's most intriguing storytellers. As we drift along this reflective shoreline between past and present, the theme becomes clear. The ocean has shaped human history not only through trade and travel, but through sudden, transformative events that altered the course of entire civilizations. The peaceful surface we admire at sunset holds beneath it ancient worlds, swallowed quickly and remembered long after. And so, with the memory of Thonis Heraclean still shimmering below the waves, we turn toward one of the most famous legends of all, a tale of an island empire said to have disappeared in a single catastrophic night. Whether it existed or not remains a topic of eternal debate, but its story has shaped our understanding of sudden ending more than any other. From the quiet hunger of a sea, we now move into the mythic fall of Atlantis. Among all the tales of civilizations that vanished as if swallowed by darkness, none has endured with as much fascination as the story of Atlantis. Whether it was real or imagined, its legend has echoed through millennia like the slow, rhythmic pulse of waves against a distant shore. Atlantis occupies a rare space in human storytelling, balanced delicately between history and myth, possibility and impossibility, clarity and obscurity. And as we drift into its narrative, we find ourselves drawn to the question that has captivated thinkers for centuries. Could an entire empire, advanced and powerful, truly have disappeared in a single night? The earliest written account of Atlantis comes from the Greek philosopher Plato, who lived in the 4th century BCE. He described Atlantis not as a simple village or coastal settlement, but as a magnificent island empire beyond the Pillars of Hercules, what we now call the Strait of Gibraltar. According to his dialogues Timaeus and Critias, Atlantis was a land blessed with fertile soil, extraordinary engineering, and a culture rich in knowledge and power. Its people built great temples, crafted intricate waterways, and cultivated fields that stretched from the mountains to the sea. In Plato's telling, Atlantis was the pinnacle of human achievement, shining brightly like a jewel at the edge of the known world. Yet even in its grandeur, the story carries a shadow. As the Atlanteans grew in wealth and might, their ambitions expanded. What began as a harmonious society devoted to wisdom and virtue slowly shifted into a civilization driven by conquest and pride. They stretched their influence across the Mediterranean, clashing with ancient Athens in a conflict that Plato painted as both political and moral. According to the philosopher, it was this decline in character, this drift away from virtue, that eventually brought divine judgment upon the island empire. And then, in one unforgettable passage, he describes their end, a night of storms, earthquakes, and unimaginable upheaval. In a single day and night of misfortune, he wrote, Atlantis sank into the sea and vanished from the world. The phrasing is calm, yet devastating, immediate, absolute, final. A superpower gone not through slow erosion or gradual collapse, but through the violent breath of nature reshaping the earth in an instant. For countless generations, readers have paused at this moment, feeling the weight of a civilization slipping beneath the waves with no survivors left to tell its true story. But was Atlantis a real place? That question has stirred endless debates. Some scholars insist that Plato crafted the tale purely as an allegory, a philosophical tool meant to illustrate moral decline and the consequences of hubris. Others believe he may have drawn inspiration from older stories, merging distant memories with mythic flourishes into a crafted narrative. And still others have proposed that Atlantis was based on real events, especially catastrophic natural disasters that occurred in the ancient world. Among these, the eruption of Thera, modern-day Santorini, stands as the most compelling parallel. Centuries before Plato, the volcanic island of Thera exploded with a force so immense that it reshaped coastlines, sent shock waves through the Aegean, and devastated the powerful Minoan civilization. Entire towns were buried beneath ash, harbors collapsed into the sea, and the sky darkened for days. For those who survived, the disaster must have felt like divine punishment, like the sudden fall of an empire in a single night. Archaeologists uncovering the ruins of Akrotiri have found homes frozen mid-moment, frescoes untouched by time, and streets preserved as though waiting for their inhabitants to return. The parallels to Atlantis are striking: an advanced seafaring culture, a catastrophic event, and a near-instant disappearance from prominence. Yet the fascination with Atlantis extends beyond physical ruins or geological explanations. It represents something deeper, a universal human curiosity about what lies beyond our knowledge. Stories of lost continents and forgotten empires appear in cultures around the world, often linked to great floods or sudden disasters. These narratives echo one another like overlapping waves, hinting at shared memories of ancient cataclysms etched into collective consciousness. Whether Atlantis itself existed matters less than the idea it symbolizes, that even the greatest societies may be vulnerable to forces larger than themselves. As we consider the tale through a soothing, nighttime lens, the drama of its destruction softens into a reflective meditation. Imagine the island not as a place of chaos, but as a world gently fading beneath swirling waters. Lights flickering along canals, temples trembling as the earth shifts, families holding one another as the sky darkens. Whether real or imagined, the vision carries a quiet poignancy, the reminder that permanence is an illusion, and that nature keeps its own counsel, indifferent to the rise and fall of empires. In the centuries after Plato, explorers, philosophers, mystics, and scientists all searched for Atlantis. Some placed it in the Mediterranean, others in the Caribbean, the North Atlantic, or even Antarctica. Each theory painted a slightly different picture, each one reflecting humanity's longing to uncover forgotten chapters of our past. But perhaps the real reason the legend endures is not because we hope to find a lost city, but because Atlantis embodies a question we continue to ask: how quickly can everything we build be taken from us? Atlantis, in that sense, serves as a bridge between reality and imagination, between the mysteries we can explain and those we cannot. It reminds us that sudden disappearances are not confined to myth. They echo throughout history in events both natural and human-made. The island may never have existed as Plato described it, yet the essence of its story resonates with the truth of many civilizations that vanished overnight. As we drift gently away from the mythic glow of Atlantis, our path leads toward another force capable of instant transformation. Not water this time, but fire. The next chapter explores how flames, eruptions, and the deep rumblings of the earth can reshape entire societies in mere moments. From the swallowed island of legend, we now move into the very real landscapes where fire brought cities to abrupt and haunting stillness. Fire has always been intertwined with human life, warming homes, lighting dark paths, forging tools, and shaping the very beginnings of civilization. Yet, just as it has created, it has also destroyed. As we leave behind the oceanic mysteries and the watery fall of Atlantis, we drift into a different element, one far more immediate and unpredictable. Fire, in all its forms, has the power to turn thriving cities into silent ruins in the span of a single night. And in this gentle bridge between stories, we pause to explore how flames, eruptions, and trembling earth have rewritten history with startling speed. Picture a landscape at dusk, the horizon painted in soft orange glow as families gather around small hearths. Fire in this form is comforting, familiar, a protective warmth against the chill of night. But just beyond this peaceful scene lies another face of fire, the deep rumble of magma beneath the earth, the sudden crack of a fault line breaking open, the surge of ash and molten rock that can extinguish entire communities before a single message of warning can be carried. Throughout history, cities built upon fertile volcanic soils enjoyed prosperity only to face destruction when the ground beneath them awakened. The Earth's crust is not still. It shifts, stretches, and releases energy in unpredictable ways. Ancient people living near fire belts, Italy, Japan, Indonesia, Central America, often built their lives under the quiet shadow of mountains capable of extraordinary fury. Sometimes these mountains slept for hundreds or even thousands of years, giving generations no reason to fear. But when they woke violently. In a single night, skies could turn crimson, ash could blanket entire regions, and lava could erase roads, temples, markets, and memories with the smooth finality of a closing curtain. Many ancient stories echo this dual nature of fire. Civilizations revered volcanoes as both gods and monsters, beings of creation who granted fertile soil, yet also beings of wrath who could take everything away without a whisper of warning. Myths from the Pacific Islands describe fiery deities shaping land with molten hands. Legends from the Mediterranean speak of underworld gates hidden within volcanic craters, where the Earth's fiery heart beats. These tales reflect the awe and fear humans felt when confronted by natural forces beyond understanding. Unlike water, which often takes slowly, fire's destruction is immediate. A flood may rise over hours or days, but an eruption or earthquake can transform the world in minutes. Stone walls crumble, roofs collapse, and streets that were vibrant with life become landscapes of stillness. The contrast is stark and unforgettable. One moment filled with routine. Children playing, merchants trading, families sharing meals, and the next moment engulfed in smoke, ash, and flame. The suddenness of these events has etched them deeply into human memory, passed down through generations as warnings of the Earth's unpredictable nature. Yet fire, like water, holds mysteries of preservation as well as destruction. When volcanic ash falls in thick layers, it can freeze a moment in time with remarkable clarity. Objects remain where they were left, homes remain arranged as they were lived in, and the outlines of vanished lives are preserved like shadows cast in stone. This type of preservation, both haunting and beautiful, offers modern archaeologists rare glimpses into worlds that ended in an instant. Through these ash-filled scenes, we can almost hear the final footsteps, the final conversations, the final breath of a city caught unprepared. Across the world, there are many such stories. Towns swallowed by pyroclastic flows, villages flattened by quakes, temples consumed by sudden firestorms. Each narrative adds a new layer to our understanding of how fragile human settlements can be when facing forces that operate on a scale far greater than any empire. And each story carries the same quiet lesson, that civilization, no matter how advanced or secure, rests upon land that is alive, moving, breathing, and occasionally unleashing its power without warning. As we linger in this gentle contemplation, the theme becomes clear. Fire's ability to erase entire societies is as profound as the sea's hunger. The elements shape humanity, giving life while also reminding us of our vulnerability. Just as Atlantis vanished in a night of storms, other communities vanished under clouds of ash and rivers of molten stone. And among all these stories, one stands above the rest, preserved with an eerie stillness that has captivated the world for centuries. From this quiet reflection on the dual nature of fire, our journey now leads into one of history's most famous examples of sudden disappearance. A pair of Roman cities frozen mid-breath beneath the volcanic fury of Mount Vesuvius. In the warm, sunlit landscapes of ancient Italy, nestled along the fertile slopes surrounding the Bay of Naples, stood two vibrant Roman cities, Pompeii and Herculaneum. To their inhabitants, life flowed in familiar rhythms. Vendors calling out prices in crowded marketplaces, artisans shaping clay and bronze in open workshops, fishermen mending nets along the shore, children running through narrow streets paved with stone. These were not remote or mythical civilizations. They were thriving, bustling communities filled with laughter, gossip, ambition, and routine. Everything about Pompeii and Herculaneum felt solid and enduring. Nothing suggested that their final day would be so sudden, so complete, and so silent. Mount Vesuvius towered above them, but it was seen not as a threat. Rather, it was part of the scenery, a mountain as unmoving and ordinary as the walls of their own homes. Generations had lived beneath it without fear, unaware that beneath its serene surface slept a force capable of reshaping the world in mere moments. When a morning of August 24th, 79 CE dawned, the people of Pompeii and Herculaneum prepared for another day of Roman life. They shopped, cooked, worked, worshipped, and planned for tomorrow with no sense of the darkness approaching. Just after midday, the earth gave a subtle, unsettling tremor. Dogs barked. Birds took to the sky. A few residents glanced toward the mountain, noting a thin plume rising from its peak. But tremors were common in the region, and most people returned to their routines. Only minutes later, the sky began to change. Smoke thickened. A roar deeper than thunder rolled across the landscape. In a single violent surge, Vesuvius erupted. A towering column of ash, rock, and pulverized earth shot high into the sky, turning daylight into twilight. Fine ash began to fall like gray snow, drifting over roofs, gardens, and public squares. At first, it may have seemed manageable, an inconvenience rather than an omen. But the ash did not stop. It grew thicker, heavier, hotter. Roofs sagged under the weight. People wrapped cloth over their mouths, squinting through clouds that obscured the sun. The city that had been full of life only hours earlier was now shrouded in darkness, illuminated only by the eerie glow of volcanic lightning flickering within the ash column. For Pompeii, the destruction came in waves. Ash and pumice rained down relentlessly, burying streets, blocking doors, and trapping those who sought shelter inside their homes. Panic spread as people attempted to flee toward the gates, navigating streets already ankle-deep in debris. Some families huddled together, hoping the eruption would pass. Others climbed onto rooftops, calling out to neighbors through the murky haze. With every hour, the air grew thicker, hotter, more toxic. The city that once echoed with market chatter now echoed with cries lost in the storm of ash. Herculaneum faced a different, but equally devastating fate. Its proximity to the sea offered hope of escape, and many residents fled toward the shore, seeking boats or shelter in stone boathouses near the beach. As evening fell, however, the eruption shifted dramatically. The towering plume collapsed, sending a torrent of superheated gas and ash, pyroclastic flows, racing down the mountainside at unimaginable speed. These flows, hotter than any furnace, reached Herculaneum first. Buildings were instantly engulfed. Streets vanished beneath a wave of burning clouds. Those seeking refuge near the shore were overcome in moments, their final positions preserved in haunting clarity beneath hardened layers of volcanic material. Meanwhile, Pompeii endured hour after hour of ashfall until dawn. The weight of pumice caused roofs to collapse. Fires broke out. People struggled to breathe in the choking haze. Some attempted to flee toward the city gates, only to be overtaken by later surges of hot gas. By the time the final pyroclastic flows reached Pompeii, the remaining inhabitants were unable to escape. In seconds, their world froze. The flows solidified everything they touched: bodies, clothing, tools, furniture, food, locking the city in a stillness like a final breath caught in stone. Centuries passed. Layers of ash and debris settled over Pompeii and Herculaneum, hiding them from memory. The cities that once bustled with Roman life lay completely entombed, untouched by wind, rain, or human hands. Time moved on while they remained perfectly preserved in darkness, their silence uninterrupted. When rediscovered in the 18th century, the world was stunned. Not only had the cities survived beneath the ash, but they had survived with astonishing detail. Walls still stood. Frescoes still glowed with color. Bread remained on bakery shelves. Tables were set for meals never eaten. In Pompeii, the voids left by decomposed bodies were filled with plaster, revealing the haunting shapes of final moments. People curled in terror, parents shielding children, groups huddled in desperate prayer. These forms did not speak of slow decline. They spoke of a single night when life halted mid-motion. Herculaneum offered an even more intimate preservation. Wooden furniture survived. Scrolls in ancient libraries remained carbonized but recoverable. Even food, nuts, grains, figs lay exactly where they had fallen. Here, unlike in Pompeii, the intense heat evaporated moisture so quickly that objects never decayed. The city became a time capsule sealed by fire, offering an unparalleled glimpse into Roman life as it existed at the very moment the world changed. What makes Pompeii and Herculaneum particularly compelling in the context of vanished civilizations is the immediacy of their end. These were not cities slowly eroded by time, war, or migration. Their disappearance was instantaneous, absolute, and silent. One moment, they were alive with bustling markets and busy streets. The next, they were frozen beneath ash, preserved in a stillness that feels almost sacred. The contrast between life and silence, between warmth and ash, between ordinary routine and sudden finality, lies at the heart of their enduring mystery. And through this lens, their story becomes more than just a tragedy. It becomes a reminder. A reminder that nature's power operates on a scale far beyond human expectation. A reminder that even thriving civilizations can be stilled in a single night. And a reminder that behind every ruin lies a story paused mid-sentence, waiting to be rediscovered. As we drift gently away from the ash-covered stillness of Pompeii and Herculaneum, our path leads toward another kind of disappearance, not one caused by fire or earth, but one shaped by human movement. From frozen cities, we now follow the quiet trail of vanished footsteps into lands where entire societies slipped away without catastrophe, leaving behind empty dwellings and unanswered questions. Across the landscapes of history, not every disappearance was born from fire, water, or trembling earth. Some civilizations slipped away more quietly, not through sudden destruction, but through movement, deliberate, mysterious, and often swift. As we leave behind the ash-frozen stillness of Pompeii and Herculaneum, we shift into a gentler, more contemplative space. Here, the cause of disappearance is not catastrophe, but choice. This bridge guides us from cities undone by violent natural forces to those emptied by human footsteps fading into distant horizons. Imagine an ancient settlement at dusk. Smoke drifts from chimneys, fields lie golden under the settling sun, and homes echo with familiar sounds. Children's laughter, the clatter of pottery, the rhythmic beating of woven cloth. Everything appears stable, rooted, alive. And yet, in certain places across the world, these scenes came to an abrupt end without warning signs of disaster. One day, a community flourished. Shortly afterward, it stood empty, its inhabitants gone without a trace of conflict, invasion, or widespread destruction. Entire villages, cliff dwellings, ceremonial centers, and cities were abandoned so completely that archaeologists centuries later could only wonder why the people left and where they went. Migration is one of humanity's oldest instincts. We move in search of food, security, opportunity, spiritual meaning, or safer climates. Often, these movements are gradual, but in some remarkable historical moments, whole populations seem to have made swift, collective decisions that resulted in settlements being vacated in what appear to be a single season or even a single night. The quietness of these exits creates a different kind of mystery, one marked not by ruins destroyed, but by structures perfectly intact and conspicuously empty. Such disappearances invite a softer form of curiosity, where disaster-induced ruins tell stories of chaos and sudden loss. Silent migrations create echoes, an absence shaped not by destruction, but by departure. Homes left in order, fields half-tended, tools arranged neatly as though the occupants meant to return but never did. These scenes carry a gentle eeriness, not frightening but deeply contemplative. They raise questions about what pressures or inspirations could cause an entire people to walk away from a place they had lived for generations. Some migrations were driven by environmental changes invisible in the moment. Rainfall patterns shifting, crops failing gradually, water sources diminishing year by year. The signs may have been subtle but impactful, prompting leaders or families to decide that leaving was the only path forward. Others may have been influenced by spiritual visions, cultural transformations, or new alliances with neighboring groups. The reasons blend practicality with belief, need with possibility. And in many cases, these movements were not chaotic escapes, but coordinated transitions. Communities might have prepared for weeks or months, gathering supplies, choosing new destinations along ancestral routes, or following omens believed to guide them toward a better life. Yet from the perspective of archaeology, what remains is the striking suddenness of their absence. When no fire destroyed their homes, when no war toppled their walls, and when no catastrophe left marks upon the land, their vanishing becomes all the more enigmatic. History hints at many such migrations. From cliff dwellings in North America to desert trade cities in the Middle East, from Andean settlements to island communities across the Pacific, traces of vanished footsteps can be found on every continent. Each site tells the same quiet story. People lived here, thrived, laughed, built, dreamed, and then, almost at once, they were gone. Their belongings intact, their structures undamaged, their trails faintly dissolving into the landscape. In this gentle reflection, we recognize the contrast between the violent erasures we have explored earlier and the soft vanishings shaped by human choice. Both types of disappearances leave mysteries behind, but the mysteries of migration feel different. They invite us to listen, not to the roar of fire or the crash of waves, but to the faint whisper of decisions carried by families moving together through nighttime valleys and sunlit paths. They remind us that human resilience often means knowing when to let go, when to leave, and when to seek new horizons, even if the reasons fade over time. This bridge prepares us for our next journey into one of the most intriguing examples of sudden abandonment. Far from volcanic ash or underwater silence, the cliff cities of the ancestral Puebloans stand as haunting reminders of a community that walked away from their towering homes with little explanation. From the concept of migration, we now move gently into the canyon shadows, where ancient dwellings cling to stone walls and the mysteries of departure linger in the quiet desert air. High on the sunlit plateaus of the American Southwest, where red cliffs rise like ancient guardians and the air carries a dry, whispering stillness, the ancestral Puebloans built cities that defied the landscape. Their stone dwellings clung to canyon walls, tucked into natural alcoves that protected them from desert winds and intense midday heat. These communities, places like Mesa Verde, Chaco Canyon, and the cliff dwellings scattered across Colorado, Utah, Arizona, and New Mexico, were once vibrant hubs of life. Yet today, they stand empty, their silence deep and uninterrupted, as though the people who shaped them simply stepped away one night and never returned. To walk through these abandoned structures is to feel the weight of time pressing gently against the senses. Rooms once filled with laughter now hold only drifting dust. Kiva's subterranean ceremonial chambers sit cold and dormant, their fires extinguished long ago. Pottery shards lie half-buried in the sand, delicate remnants of a world filled with artistry and intention. There is no sign of violent destruction, no evidence of invasion or sudden catastrophe. Instead, the disappearance of the ancestral Puebloans seems marked by an eerie gentleness, a departure that was deliberate, coordinated, and yet wrapped in mystery. For centuries, scholars have attempted to understand what prompted these communities to leave. The Puebloans had thrived in the region for over 1,000 years, gradually refining their architecture, agricultural techniques, and societal structure. They built multi-story dwellings out of sandstone blocks, mastered dry farming in arid conditions, and developed intricate cultural traditions centered around celestial observations. Their cities were interconnected through vast networks of roads and trade routes that stretched hundreds of miles. Life here was not simple or primitive. It was organized, intelligent, and deeply spiritual. And yet, somewhere around the late 1200s, something changed. In a relatively short period, the population began moving away from their monumental settlements. Villages that had stood crowded with families became sparsely inhabited. Entire cliff dwellings, once alive with daily rhythms, were left empty. Eventually, the region that had supported thousands became silent. The people didn't vanish from the earth. They continued life in other areas of the Southwest, forming the cultural foundations of today's Hopi, Zuni, and various Pueblo tribes. But their sudden abandonment of these iconic cliff cities remains one of North America's most peaceful yet perplexing mysteries. Climate is often cited as a key factor. The Puebloans lived in a land where water was both precious and unpredictable. Archaeological evidence suggests that a long, severe drought set in during the late 13th century. A drought so intense that crops withered in the fields and water sources dwindled to muddy trickles. A society so dependent on maize and seasonal rainfall would have faced increasing hardships. As harvests declined, families may have found themselves struggling to survive in a land that no longer yielded what it once did. Yet, drought alone does not fully explain the coordinated nature of their departure. Other theories weave themselves into the narrative, each offering a fragment of a larger truth. Some researchers believe social pressures mounted as populations increased and resources grew scarce. Conflicts may have arisen, not necessarily violent wars, but tensions, disagreements, and fractures within the community. The cliff dwellings themselves may reflect a shift toward defensive architecture, suggesting that safety became a concern. Other theories point to changes in religious practices or spiritual revelations that could have guided the community to relocate, following ceremonial paths or ancestral instructions believed to lead them toward more promising lands. Still, others suggest environmental degradation played a role. Over centuries of habitation, local forests may have been over-harvested for firewood and construction materials. Wildlife populations may have declined, soils may have become exhausted, and the land, once generous, may have been gradually worn down. When the combined strain of environmental challenges, social shifts, and spiritual influences became too heavy, the people might have chosen to leave, seeking balance in new territories. Despite these theories, one detail stands out. The departure appears orderly. Homes were not burned. Possessions were not left in chaotic heaps. The silence that followed feels intentional, like a chapter closed with care rather than erased by force. To imagine the moment of departure is to picture families packing belongings carefully, elders guiding younger generations along familiar trails, and the final extinguishing of hearth fires that had warmed their homes for centuries. The wind would carry away the smoke, and the canyon walls would eventually absorb the fading echoes of footsteps moving toward distant valleys. These cliff cities today remain profoundly evocative. Standing within them, one can almost sense the presence of those who lived here, not as ghosts, but as memories embedded in sandstone. The architecture speaks of resilience and ingenuity. The abandoned rooms speak of a transformation too subtle to fully grasp. Visitors often describe a calm, almost sacred atmosphere, as though time itself moves differently within these ancient alcoves. The disappearance of the ancestral Puebloans invites reflection not on destruction, but on transition. Their story reveals how civilizations evolve, adapt, and sometimes choose to leave behind the places that once defined them. It reminds us that a vanishing can be peaceful, that history's mysteries are not always born from disaster. Sometimes, they are born from the quiet courage it takes to seek a new beginning. As we step out of these sandstone shadows, the narrative gently turns once again. If the Puebloans left by choice, other civilizations vanished due to more elusive forces that blur the boundaries between culture and climate, myth and geology. Our next destination lies across the world, in a region where ancient stories and scientific puzzles intertwine, creating one of the most debated disappearances in the ancient world. The enigmatic collapse of the Bronze Age's most powerful island civilization. In the vast blue expanse of the Aegean Sea, where rippling waters shimmer under the Mediterranean sun, the story of the Minoans unfolds. A story both luminous and shadowed, marked by sophistication and sudden silence. The Minoan civilization, flourishing on the island of Crete and its surrounding territories, was once one of the brightest centers of the ancient world. They built elegant palaces filled with intricate frescoes, practiced advanced navigation, engaged in wide-reaching trade, and cultivated an artistic culture that felt almost modern in its grace. Yet, despite their achievements, the Minoans experienced a disappearance wrapped not in pure myth, nor in fully explained history, but in a mysterious blend of both. And at the heart of this enigma lies the volcanic island of Thera, modern-day Santorini, a place where beauty and catastrophe have always lived side by side. To understand the Minoans is to step into a world of vibrant colors and rhythmic movement. Their art celebrated nature, leaping dolphins, blooming lilies, spiraling patterns that echoed the sea. Unlike many contemporaries, they left behind little to suggest a culture obsessed with war. Instead, their surviving artifacts depict athletic rituals, ceremonies, and a society that understood both elegance and engineering. Their palaces, like the one at Knossos, were labyrinthine masterpieces complete with advanced plumbing, storage complexes, and frescoed chambers. The Minoans commanded trade routes that connected them to Egypt, the Levant, Anatolia, and mainland Greece, making their island a central hub of Bronze Age commerce. But beauty can mask fragility. The volcanic island of Thera, just north of Crete, simmered with an explosive potential far greater than the people of that time could have imagined. Sometime around 1600 BCE, though dates remain debated, the volcano erupted with a force so immense that it reshaped the entire island, sending colossal ash clouds into the atmosphere and generating tsunamis that swept across the Aegean. The eruption ranks among the most powerful in human history, a natural event capable of disrupting climates, darkening skies, and altering civilizations. The city of Akrotiri on Thera, often called the Pompeii of the Aegean, was buried beneath thick layers of ash. Yet, unlike Pompeii, no body has ever been found there. Homes were left orderly, doorways unblocking escape routes, belongings arranged with purpose. It seems the people had time to evacuate. The earth may have shaken with pre-eruption tremors, warning them to flee. And flee they did, leaving behind a snapshot of a thriving port city frozen not in death but in absence. The motifs painted on their walls, ships, lilies, swallows, now rest beneath volcanic ash, preserved like delicate memories. But while Akrotiri was destroyed, the question remains, what impact did the eruption have on the wider Minoan civilization, especially on Crete? Theories abound, each offering a piece of the puzzle. The tsunamis generated by the eruption likely slammed into northern Crete, damaging coastal settlements and ports essential to Minoan trade. Ash fallout could have contaminated crops and water supplies, disrupting agriculture for years. Atmospheric changes might have affected rainfall and seasons, creating hardships long after the initial catastrophe. Still, the Minoans did not vanish immediately. Archaeological evidence shows that life continued on Crete for some time after the eruption. Palaces were rebuilt, art continued, and trade persisted. Yet something subtle had shifted. The Minoans, once unmatched in influence, began to lose dominance in the Aegean. A weakened infrastructure, combined with political instability or internal conflict, may have left them vulnerable to outside forces. Eventually, around 1450 BCE, many Minoan palaces were destroyed, perhaps through invasion by the Mycenaeans from mainland Greece, or perhaps through internal civil strife amplified by long-term environmental pressures. This slow unraveling, punctuated by the sudden violence of the Thera eruption, creates a layered mystery. The Minoans did not fall in a single night, yet their civilization's turning point was marked by a catastrophic event that unfolded over days and weeks, but echoed for centuries. Their disappearance was both sudden and gradual, both natural and human, both understood and deeply uncertain. Myths later woven by the Greeks add yet another layer of intrigue. The tale of Atlantis, Plato's story of an advanced island civilization destroyed in a single day and night of misfortune, has long been linked to Thera's eruption. Whether or not the Minoans inspire the legend, the parallels are difficult to ignore. A prosperous maritime culture, an island shaken by catastrophe, and a civilization that faded into obscurity, leaving behind ruins that whisper of former greatness. Some historians caution that the connection is symbolic rather than literal. Others believe that such a powerful event may have lived on in oral traditions long enough to inspire Plato's narrative. As the centuries passed, the Minoans became a memory etched into fragments of pottery, frescoes, and myths. Their linear writing script, remains undeciphered, leaving their voices locked behind symbols that refuse to reveal their stories. With each discovery, archaeologists come closer to understanding them, and yet the core mystery of their decline remains delicately unresolved. The Minoans exist in a liminal space between history and legend, their disappearance shaped by both Earth's fury and humanity's shifting tides. To stand on the edge of Santorini's caldera today, gazing into the vast, seawater-filled crater left by the ancient eruption, is to feel the echo of that moment. The cliffs drop steeply into the sea, their layers of volcanic rock telling the story of an island torn apart. Across the water, gentle waves lap against the shores where Minoan ships once sailed. The contrast between the serene present and the violent past deepens the mystery, reminding us that even the most beautiful places can harbor the memory of unimaginable power. The story of the Minoans teaches us that civilizations can disappear not only through destruction, but through transformation. Sometimes the forces that reshape a society are volcanic and unmistakable. Other times they are slow, quiet, and woven through generations. The Minoans did not simply vanish. They changed, fractured, and blended into new identities carried by new cultures. Their legacy radiates through myths, through artistry, and through the enduring fascination they inspire. From the Aegean, our journey now moves toward another region shaped by sudden collapse. This time, not by volcanic fury alone, but by the fragile balance of climate, geography, and interregional networks. Our next step leads into the heart of an empire built along rivers, temples, and expansive trade systems, a civilization whose fall was as swift as it was complex. Here, we explore how interconnected worlds can crumble in a single night of shifting forces, carrying entire cultures into the shadows of history. Across the dry plains of what is now Pakistan and northwest India lie the quiet remains of one of humanity's earliest and most enigmatic urban civilizations, the Indus Valley Civilization, also known as the Harappan world. Its great cities, such as Mohenjo-daro and Harappa, rose thousands of years ago with an elegance and order that still inspire awe. Grid-planned streets, multi-story homes, advanced drainage systems, public baths, standardized bricks. These were not the inventions of small settlement, but of a complex society operating with remarkable coordination. Yet, despite their sophistication, the Harappan cities experienced a disappearance wrapped not in fire or war, but in a calm, almost whispered decline. By the time their final chapters unfolded, their once bustling streets had emptied, their workshops had grown silent, and their symbols, written in a script still undeciphered, had faded into dust. To wander through these ancient ruins is to encounter a civilization that feels both familiar and foreign. Their urban design reflects a sense of harmony and practicality. Streets intersected at right angles, suggesting an early understanding of civic planning. Wells were placed within homes for easy access to water. Entire neighborhoods were linked by drainage channels so meticulously engineered that modern systems have sometimes borrowed inspiration from them. The Great Bath of Mohenjo-daro, with its watertight brick lining, hints at ritual cleanliness and communal gatherings. And yet, for all their achievements, the Harappans left behind no grand palaces, no towering statues, no readable texts that proclaim their rulers or victories. Their society seems to have valued balance and unity over monumentality, order over domination. This quiet sophistication makes the mystery of their decline all the more intriguing. There is no evidence of conquest sweeping through their cities. No signs of mass fires. No collapsed walls indicating sudden warfare. Instead, their disappearance appears gradual and gentle, like a long sunset rather than a sudden nightfall. Scholars believe the Harappans did not simply perish, they dispersed. But what could make one of the world's largest Bronze Age civilizations slowly abandon its magnificent cities? One answer lies in the shifting rivers. The Indus Valley Civilization flourished along waterways, most notably the Indus River and an ancient river system known as the Sarasvati or Gagarhakra. These rivers nourished crops, supported trade routes, and sustained daily life. But the earth beneath them was changing. Tectonic movements may have altered river courses. Some rivers dried up, others flooded unpredictably. For a civilization so deeply connected to water, these changes would have disrupted agriculture and strained travel and trade. Fields that had fed thousands could become barren overnight. Ports once thriving with merchants might suddenly lose their access to waterways. A slow environmental shift could ripple into every aspect of life, urging families to seek stability elsewhere. Climate may have been another quiet force of change. Studies suggest that the region experienced gradual drying around the time of the Harappan decline. Monsoon patterns weakened. Rainfall decreased. The once green plains became more arid. Crops failed, and food shortages likely followed. As droughts intensified, communities may have chosen to leave urban centers, moving eastward toward the Ganges Basin, where rainfall was more reliable. What appears as a disappearance in archaeological terms may have been a migration, one so gradual that it left little sign of disruption. Yet environmental factors alone cannot fully explain the complexity of their decline. There are hints of social transformation as well. As resources became scarce, trade networks may have faltered. Artisans producing beads, pottery, and metal goods may have lost their markets. Urban life, dependent on steady flow of commerce, could have become unsustainable. The rule of centralized authorities, if they existed, may have weakened. Communities may have fractured into smaller groups, leading to a decentralized societal structure. Instead of one great collapse, we might be witnessing the gentle dissolution of a once unified culture into many smaller, evolving identities. Another layer of mystery lies in the undeciphered indescript, found on seals, pottery, and tablets. These symbols represent the thoughts, transactions, or beliefs of a civilization that left no readable voice behind. Without a clear written record, the Harappans cannot explain their own disappearance. Their silence forces us to interpret them through the objects they left, the soil beneath them, and the rivers that once shaped their world. Their story remains partially hidden, preserved in symbols that resist interpretation. Despite the fading of their cities, the Harappans did not vanish from history entirely. Genetic studies and cultural analysis suggest that their descendants became woven into the fabric of later civilizations on the Indian subcontinent. Elements of their traditions, craftsmanship, agricultural practices, and cultural motifs continued, transformed by time, but not erased. Their disappearance was not extinction, but evolution, a transition from great cities to smaller settlements, from one era into another. To imagine the final nights of the Indus cities is to picture a serene yet somber scene. Lamps glowing faintly in the windows of brick homes. Families gathering for meals as they had for generations. Artisans completing their final batches of pottery. And then, gradually, fewer lights flickering in the evening. Fewer footsteps echoing in the streets. Fewer hands tending the fields. The city does not crumble, it empties. Slowly, season by season, until the wind becomes the only traveler through its once-ordered lanes. Today, the Indus ruins rest beneath the same sun that once warmed bustling marketplaces and lively workshops. Their silence is not haunting but contemplative, inviting visitors to reflect on the fragile interdependence between nature and civilization. Their disappearance stands as a reminder that even the most advanced societies can be undone not by enemies, but by the subtle forces of climate, rivers, and time. From these quiet plains, where ancient cities faded without fire or war, our journey now moves into an even more complex realm, one where societies connected across continents collapsed not alone, but together. We now step into the dramatic and still debated unraveling of the entire late Bronze Age world, a moment when empires fell, cities burned, and an interconnected network of civilizations vanished in what seemed like a single catastrophic night. History often moves in gradual arcs, where centuries unfold like long, steady breaths. But every so often, the world changes in an instant, so abruptly that entire civilizations seem to collapse together, as though tied by unseen threads. As we step away from the quiet disappearance of the Indus Valley cities, we enter a darker, more turbulent realm of history, where the fall of one kingdom triggered the fall of another, and then another, until the entire late Bronze Age world stood in ruin. This bridge invites us into that moment, guiding us from gentle decline to sudden, interconnected catastrophe. Picture the ancient world around 1200 BCE, a network of powerful empires and bustling city-states stretched across the eastern Mediterranean and Near East. Egypt, the Hittites, the Mycenaeans, the Canaanites, the Cypriots, each thrived through trade, diplomacy, and complex alliances. Their ships crisscrossed the seas, their merchants exchanged copper and tin to forge bronze, and their diplomats wrote in shared languages and scripts. It was a world that depended on connection, one of the earliest global system civilization had ever formed. And like all intricate systems, it was fragile. Now imagine this world at dusk, unaware that its final night approaches. In one city, torches glow atop palace walls. In another, scribes smooth fresh clay tablets for diplomatic letters. Far away, ships drift into harbors carrying goods from distant lands. It feels peaceful, organized, almost unstoppable in its sophistication. And yet, beneath this appearance of stability, forces were gathering. Forces both natural and human, known and unknown, weaving together the threads of collapse. The fall did not strike one kingdom alone. Instead, Destruction spread in waves across the region. Cities were burned to the ground. Palaces were abandoned. Trade networks that had flourished for centuries suddenly snapped. Written records from the time speak with confusion, fear, and urgency. Letters from desperate kings plead for supplies, soldiers, or assistance that never arrived. For many of these once prosperous societies, their final hours were filled with smoke, chaos, and unanswered cries for aid. But what caused this cascading collapse? Historians still debate the answer, and perhaps no single explanation is sufficient. Some point to climate change, droughts, crop failures, and famines that strain societies already operating at the edge of sustainability. Others highlight new forms of warfare or shifting populations whose movements disrupted established powers. Still others propose earthquakes, plagues, economic instability, or internal rebellion. Each theory adds another shard to the mosaic, suggesting a world destabilized by multiple pressures striking at once. The most mysterious factor of all is the arrival of the so-called Sea Peoples, whose raids and invasions are recorded in Egyptian inscriptions. They appeared seemingly out of nowhere, attacking ports and cities across the Mediterranean. Whether they were refugees fleeing disasters, warriors seeking new lands, or displaced migrants traveling in desperate waves, their presence deepened the chaos already spreading. Their identity remains uncertain, adding yet another layer of mystery to an already shadowed era. The fall of the Late Bronze Age was not a single spark, but a chain reaction, a collapse of systems that depended too heavily on one another. When one city fell, trade routes broke. When trade routes broke, economies faltered. When economies faltered, social cohesion weakened. And when social cohesion weakened, once stable empires fractured. It was a downward spiral unfolding across nations, echoing from coast to coast, a true storm of history, in which no one truly understood what was happening until the world they knew had vanished. What makes this collapse so haunting is its blend of speed and silence. Entire cities disappeared, yet their ruins still hold traces of unfinished days. Vessels left in quays, meals abandoned on cooking stones, tools dropped mid-task. These remnants echo the same unsettling stillness found in other vanished civilizations, creating a feeling that the world paused during a moment of upheaval and then simply never resumed. This bridge marks our transition from the serene disappearances of earlier civilizations to a more violent, interconnected unraveling, a moment when a whole era dimmed like a candle guttering in the wind. From here, we move deeper into the heart of the Late Bronze Age collapse, exploring the ruins, records, and mysteries that reveal how an entire world could fall so suddenly and still leave us searching for answers more than 3,000 years later. You said, Section 12 expand Crow English Ma, without headings, just section name, section number, AI, words count section, PY mention Wally Rachna, words cam Naho Chat GPT said. 12. Deep dive. The Late Bronze Age collapse. 200 words across the land stretching from Greece to Egypt, from Anatolia to the Levant. The Late Bronze Age once thrived like a vast, interconnected tapestry of empires, kingdoms, and bustling coastal cities. But around 1200 BCE, that tapestry unraveled with terrifying speed. In a span so brief that it echoes the single night, theme woven through our journey, entire civilizations faltered. Palaces burned. Trade routes collapsed. Written languages disappeared. It was not merely a fall. It was a near-total transformation of the ancient world, a dark turning point after which history itself had to be rebuilt. This deep dive guides us into the heart of that collapse, where history's clarity blurs into mystery, and where the ruins still whisper of an age that died too quickly for its causes to be fully understood. To understand the magnitude of this event, imagine the Late Bronze Age at its height. The Mycenaean Greeks constructed fortified citadels crowned with palaces rich in frescoes and storerooms filled with goods from across the Mediterranean. The Hittite Empire controlled vast stretches of Anatolia, ruling through diplomacy, warfare, and an intricate bureaucracy. Egypt's new kingdom stood as a monumental powerhouse. Its pharaohs engaged in both conflict and trade with neighboring states. Cyprus produced the copper essential to creating bronze, while ports across Canaan thrived as hubs of maritime commerce. These societies were more interconnected than any before them. Merchant ships carried not just goods but ideas, writing systems, artistic styles, religious symbols. Clay tablets recorded contracts, treaties, and royal correspondence, forming a multilingual paper trail that reveals just how global their world truly was. And then, remarkably quickly, the connection snapped. Archaeological layers from this period show widespread destruction. City after city was burned: Mycenae, Pylos, Ugarit, Hattusa, and dozens more. The Hittite Empire collapsed completely. Its capital was abandoned, never to flourish again. The Mycenaean palaces fell, plunging Greece into a centuries-long dark age. Ugarit, once a thriving coastal center, sent desperate letters begging for military aid, only for the pleas to arrive too late. In Egypt, inscriptions depict violent battles against unfamiliar invaders. Trade networks vanished so suddenly that the distinctive pottery styles used across the Mediterranean disappear from the archaeological record like extinguished embers. What triggered such immense destruction? No single explanation fits the scale or speed. Instead, scholars believe multiple crises converged, each intensifying the others until the entire region buckled. Climate change, for example, plays a central role in many theories. Studies of pollen, tree rings, and sediment suggest a prolonged drought struck the eastern Mediterranean during this period. Crops failed, famine spread, and populations grew restless. A fragile system, dependent on stable climate and reliable harvests, could not absorb years of hardship without breaking. War and unrest also contributed. As resources dwindled, tensions between neighboring powers likely intensified. Internal rebellions may have weakened once mighty empires. The fall of the Hittite capital, Hattusa, shows signs of destruction from within as well as from outside pressures. The Mycenaean palaces, too, exhibit layers of fire and collapse that hint at both conflict and societal breakdown. Even powerful Egypt struggled, as shown by inscriptions from the reigns of Merneptah and Ramesses III. Their records describe battles against the mysterious Sea Peoples, groups of seafaring tribes whose sudden appearance added chaos to an already destabilized world. But who were the Sea Peoples? Their origins remain uncertain, adding a deep shroud of mystery to the collapse. Some scholars believe there were displaced populations fleeing drought or famine from regions further west. Others suggest they were mercenaries, pirates, or migrating tribes seeking new land in the wake of crumbling states. Egyptian records depict them traveling with families, wagons, and oxen, a sign of permanent migration rather than temporary raids. Wherever they came from, their arrival was catastrophic for many coastal cities, which burned shortly after their appearance. Economic breakdown played its part as well. The Bronze Age economy depended heavily on long-distance trade. Copper from Cyprus and tin from distant lands were essential for weapons, tools, and status goods. When instability disrupted these trade routes, societies lost the ability to manufacture the very items that sustained their political structure. Power shifted, authority fractured, prestige economies collapsed. Without bronze, battles changed. Without trade, alliances dissolved. Without centralized control, cities became vulnerable. Disease may also have contributed. The close trade connections that once strengthened the region could have facilitated the spread of epidemics. While evidence remains limited, it is not difficult to imagine how disease might strike populations already weakened by famine and conflict. Together, these pressures formed a perfect storm, one in which civilizations toppled like a chain of falling stones. The collapse did not represent a single night in literal terms, yet the speed of ruin across multiple states created the impression of a world ending almost simultaneously. Within a few decades, the grand palaces and administrative centers that had orchestrated international diplomacy fell silent. Literacy declined. Pottery styles simplified. Monumental architecture ceased. It was as though the lights of the ancient world dimmed, leaving an age of shadows. Yet even in collapse, there were survivors. Egypt endured, though weakened. Small city-states emerged from former empire territories. In the ashes of the Mycenaean world, the seeds of classical Greece eventually took root. The Phoenicians rose as master sailors and traders, their alphabetic script influencing future writing systems across continents. The collapse was not an end so much as a transformation, a painful birth of new cultures rising from the ruins of the old. To stand among the remains of these fallen cities today is to feel a chilling stillness. The wide courtyards of Ugarit lie empty. The once thriving markets of Mycenae echo only with wind, and the toppled stones of Etusa rest under a sky that watched centuries of power rise and vanish. The silence holds a peculiar weight, as if the landscape remembers the night when the ancient world trembled and changed course. From this vast collapse, where entire kingdoms disappeared in a shared moment of catastrophe, our journey now turns toward one final, haunting mystery, one that unfolded not across an entire region, but within a single monumental structure deep in the Yucatan jungle. A city whose people built pyramids rising above the rainforest canopy, only to abandon them under circumstances still debated today. As we move forward, we step from the ashes of the Bronze Age into the shadowed temples of the Maya, where yet another ancient silence awaits. Across the unfolding stories of lost civilizations, each vanished people left behind not only ruins and artifacts, but something less tangible, echoes, faint and persistent, carrying forward into the present like lingering ripples on an ancient lake. This section drifts into that quiet space, a place between solid fact and drifting mystery, where the collapse of worlds long past continues to shape the cultures that followed. After exploring the sudden disappearances of empires and cities, stories of flames, abandonments, floods, and silent departures, we now gently guide the narrative toward understanding how these vanished civilizations still breathe through the traditions, languages, myths, and memories of humanity. It is a bridge made not of stone, but of meaning, stretching from remote antiquity to our own living world. When a civilization falls, its monuments may become overgrown, its languages forgotten, its cities swallowed by dust or jungle. Yet cultures rarely vanish in absolute silence. Their influence flows into neighboring peoples, into later generations, into the stories we tell and the symbols we continue to use. Like the glow that lingers after a candle is blown out, the legacies of ancient societies persist long after their physical forms have disappeared. To trace these echoes is to listen to history not as a sequence of isolated collapses, but as an ongoing conversation, one in which even the lost still speak. Consider, for a moment, the peoples of the late Bronze Age whose world unraveled under the weight of war, famine, climate shifts, and migration. Though Mycenaean palaces burned and their bureaucratic script fell out of use, their myths survived. The epic tales that would become the foundation of Greek literature, stories of heroes, divine quarrels, city sieges, and long journeys home, likely emerged from memories passed down through oral tradition, long after the palaces themselves were abandoned. In this way, even a fallen civilization found a second life not in architecture, but in imagination, whispering through the ages until poets shaped its fading shadows into the works we still read today. The Hittites, too, leave cultural footprints long after their empire crumbled. Their legal codes, religious syncretism, and diplomatic habits influenced later Near Eastern societies. Though their capital, Hattusa, collapsed into ruin, their way of connecting gods across regions and cultures foreshadowed later traditions that integrated diverse deities into unified pantheons. The collapse of the Hittite Empire scattered its people, but their ideas migrated with them, weaving into the cultural threads of successor societies in Anatolia and beyond. The empire may have fallen in a metaphorical single night, but its worldview survived in quieter, more enduring ways. And then there is the Maya, builders of towering pyramids and intricate calendars, whose great cities were abandoned long before Spanish chroniclers arrived. The monumental architecture may have succumbed to time and the weight of encroaching jungle, but the Maya people themselves did not vanish. Their languages endure. Their rituals continue, adapted and transformed across centuries. Their astronomical knowledge, once carved into stone tablets, now resonates in the cultural pride and cosmological practices of their descendants. To this day, Maya communities honor the cycles of time with ceremonies that echo ancient traditions. The disappearance of the classic Maya cities was a dramatic historical shift, but the civilization's cultural spirit survived, enduring not as ruins, but as living heritage. These lingering echoes remind us that civilizations rarely vanish completely. Even in sudden collapse, fragments of identity find new soil in which to grow. Something always remains, an idea, a symbol, a tradition, a myth. This bridge between the past and the present is woven from countless strands. Linguistic borrowings, scientific knowledge, artistic motifs, architectural styles, agricultural practices, and even the simple persistence of stories told from parent to child. These fragments are like embers carried from one fire to kindle another, allowing what once was to influence what will be. As we move slowly through this bridge of shadows, we begin to see patterns in how cultures absorb the remnants of others. When one civilization falls, another may rise on the same land, adopting and adapting what they find. The Olmec left behind colossal stone heads and symbolic iconography that shaped the visual traditions of later Mesoamerican societies. The Indus Valley Civilization, mysterious in its decline, contributed urban planning concepts that echoed faintly through later South Asian settlements. Even if their written language remains undeciphered, their influence persists. Standardized weights, drainage systems, craft techniques, and a cultural order that likely inspired subsequent societies. In many cases, the line between vanished and survived becomes blurred. Civilizations do not simply wink out. They transform. People migrate, adapt, merge with newcomers, or modify their ways of living in response to shifting environments. What appears to be disappearance may actually be evolution, just beyond the clarity of written record. Archaeology captures material traces, but cultural memory often flows through channels less visible, preserving customs that feel so normal today that their ancient origins go unnoticed. Even the great stories of global floods found across distant cultures may preserve memories of ancient environmental events, passed down through generations until they became myth. The tales of Atlantis, although fictionalized in classical texts, may echo distorted recollections of real Bronze Age catastrophes. In this sense, myths become vessels preserving the emotional truth of collapse even when factual details are lost. Through symbolic storytelling, the psychological impact of sudden disappearance is carried forward, allowing future generations to process the fragility of human achievement. When we observe these echoes, we begin to understand the collapse of civilizations not solely as endings, but as transitions, moments when humanity reshapes itself under the pressures of nature, conflict, scarcity, or internal strain. The cities may vanish, but people remain. Their descendants, whether directly or indirectly connected, continue. Their innovations, once at risk of being buried forever, find new life. Their failures become lessons. Their memories become anchors, and their stories become guidance for societies navigating their own uncertain futures. This bridge between ancient loss and modern continuity also highlights how deeply interconnected human cultures have always been. The collapse of one society often sends shockwaves that reshape its neighbors. The fall of the Mycenaeans contributed to shifts in trade networks that eventually influenced the rise of the Phoenicians. The decline of the Maya altered patterns of settlement that shaped later political geography in Mesoamerica. Even in their disappearance, civilizations exert force, sometimes subtle, sometimes transformative, on the world around them. It is this interplay of continuity and collapse, of loss and legacy, that makes ancient mysteries so compelling. We are drawn to the ruins not only because they represent what once was, but because they remind us of the resilience embedded in our shared past. Humans persist through change. Knowledge endures through reinvention. The whispers of vanished peoples continue to move through us, influencing our languages, our stories, our sciences, and our imaginations. In the soft, calming atmosphere of this documentary, the bridge becomes an invitation to reflect slowly, to breathe deeply, and to sense the presence of those who lived long before us. Their fears, triumphs, and losses were not so different from our own. They built, they struggled, they adapted, they imagined futures they would never see, but that we now inhabit. To walk across this bridge is to acknowledge that the ancient world is not dead, but sleeping within us, its fragments woven into the fabric of our present. As we near the end of this section, the path ahead begins to shift gently again, guiding us away from the echoes of vanished societies and toward a final space of reflection. We have traversed landscapes of sudden disappearance, explored mysteries etched into stone and soil, and listened to civilizations that once thrived before fading into shadow. Now, the journey prepares to turn toward its closing chapter, a calm, contemplative moment where all the threads we've followed begin to settle into a larger understanding. From the legacies of lost empires to the fragile beauty of cultural memory, the bridge we've walked across leads us to one final question. What do these ancient vanishings teach us about our own world, our own impermanence, and the stories we choose to leave behind? This is where the narrative now gently carries us, into the soft glow of the documentary's concluding reflection, where the mysteries of the past offer quiet wisdom for the present. Throughout our journey, we have walked among shattered walls, drowned coastlines, abandoned temples, and empty streets where thousands once lived their everyday lives. We have traced sudden disappearances, puzzling collapses, and the chilling quiet that follows when a society dissolves almost overnight. But now, as we approach the final turn of the narrative, this section gently invites us into a deeper meditation, one that shifts from individual stories of loss to the broader question behind them all. Why do civilizations vanish? What forces, visible or hidden, gather like distant storms until the world of a people breaks apart? And what can these ancient disappearances teach us about the fragile rhythms that guide human existence? This section is not a list of explanations, nor a lecture on predictable patterns. Instead, it flows like a calm river, exploring the layers beneath collapse, the interplay of nature and human choices, the vulnerabilities in even the strongest societies, and the strange, almost poetic ways in which silence arrives after centuries of sound. It is a space where history softens into philosophy and where mystery expands into understanding. To begin, imagine standing at the edge of an ancient city in the moments before its decline. A place full of movement, merchants calling across busy markets, workers shaping stone blocks for new construction, priests lighting incense at temple altars, children running between houses of wood and clay. At that moment, no one would imagine that within a single generation, or sometimes a single night, all of this would fade, leaving behind only stone foundations, broken pottery, and unanswered questions. The truth is that civilizations rarely sense their endings until the signs have been accumulating for far too long. One of the most powerful forces behind collapse is the environment itself. Climate shifts have repeatedly shaped human destiny. A prolonged drought can drain rivers, wither crops, and force migrations that strain neighboring societies. A sudden cooling period can shorten growing seasons and spark famine. Floods, earthquakes, volcanic eruptions all leave marks on the archaeological record, sometimes aligning precisely with the moments when cities were abandoned. Nature does not intentionally destroy civilizations. Instead, it challenges them, and societies either adapt or falter. The mystery arises when adaptation becomes impossible, and a once thriving culture finds itself overwhelmed by forces it cannot control. Yet environmental stress on its own rarely explains everything. Human decisions amplify or weaken its effects. A city dependent on trade may collapse when routes are disrupted. A kingdom built on rigid social structures may struggle when flexibility is needed. A rapidly growing empire may deplete its resources faster than it can replace them. Over time, even small missteps can accumulate into large-scale vulnerability. In many vanished civilizations, we see evidence of strain, over-farming, deforestation, overpopulation, problems familiar even in our modern world. These choices form a quiet thread through history, reminding us that downfall often comes not from one disaster, but from many little fractures spreading beneath the surface. Another layer of disappearance lies in conflict. Wars reshape borders, topple dynasties, and weaken once powerful centers. External invasions or internal rebellions can turn prosperous cities into ruins within days. The Sea Peoples, mysterious groups who swept across the Mediterranean, show how sudden migrations or raiding forces can destabilize entire regions. But conflict is rarely random. It often grows from competition for land, food, or power, echoes of deeper struggles beneath the battlefield. Even in peaceful times, the potential for unrest lingers at the edges of human communities, waiting for the right moment to ignite. Trade, too, plays a crucial role. In ancient worlds where long-distance exchange was a lifeline, losing access to copper, tin, grain, spices, or prestige goods could trigger cascading failures. A merchant city without trade loses its wealth. A kingdom without metal loses its tools and weapons. A region without grain imports faces hunger. These interconnections, so fragile and so essential, act like threads in a web. When one snaps, the tension shifts, sometimes unraveling everything. This fragility makes the sudden vanishing of certain civilizations feel eerily familiar, echoing through modern supply chains and economic systems. There is also the quieter, more internal reason societies fade: cultural transformation. Sometimes a civilization does not collapse violently. It evolves. People migrate, merge with others, adopt new religions, change languages, or shift their political structures. To outsiders, it may appear that a culture has vanished, but in truth, it has simply taken on a different form, hidden within new traditions. Many societies we call vanished still live within their descendants, their rituals woven into daily life in ways subtle enough to be overlooked. This kind of disappearance is less dramatic but equally profound, a reminder that identity is fluid, not fixed. And then there is mystery, the part that refuses to be fully explained. This is where the heart of fascination lies, and where even historians pause in contemplation. For every civilization with clear evidence of drought or conflict, there are others whose disappearance is marked only by silence. Cities left orderly, as if people walked away calmly and never returned. Artworks completed, buildings intact, food still stored in pottery jars. No signs of war, no signs of disaster, just absence. In these places, history becomes a shadow, and imagination steps forward to fill the unknown. Were the people responding to spiritual visions? Environmental changes invisible to us today? Epidemics that left no detectable trace? Or something else entirely? Something we cannot yet comprehend? The ruins themselves invite these questions. They stand like frozen moments, holding the posture of life long after that life has ended. Each broken column, each vine-covered wall, each abandoned courtyard carries a sense of presence within absence. This emotional quality, this haunting stillness, is part of what draws us to stories of vanished civilizations. In their silence, we sense both loss and wisdom. They are reminders that human achievements, no matter how grand, are temporary. They urge us to look at our own world with humility and perspective. But this section is not meant to alarm or warn. Instead, it offers a gentle reflection on the natural cycles of rise and fall, creation and dissolution. Civilizations, like living beings, grow, thrive, struggle, and eventually transform or fade. This is not failure. It is simply the flow of human history. Every society leaves something behind, whether in stone, in memory, or in the cultural DNA carried forward through generations. Even the most abrupt vanishings did not erase the people entirely. They continued in new forms, new lands, new identities. The continuity between past and present becomes clearer when we step back and observe the larger pattern. Civilizations vanish, but humanity endures. Empires fall, but knowledge scatters and reappears. Cities crumble, but stories survive. Through each collapse, there's always renewal, sometimes slow, sometimes immediate, but always present. This perspective transforms the mystery of disappearance into a narrative of resilience, a record of how humans adapt to challenges and carry forward the essence of their ancestors. As we walk deeper into this reflection, we begin to understand that studying vanished civilizations is not only about the past. It is about understanding the delicate balance of societies, including our own. The same forces that shaped ancient collapses, environmental change, resource depletion, migration, conflict, cultural shifts, still shape our world today. Yet the ancient stories offer hope as much as caution. They show that even in moments of profound transformation, humanity finds ways to survive, to rebuild, to continue. Civilizations vanish, but people do not simply disappear into darkness. They adapt, they merge, they evolve. This realization brings a calming symmetry to the narrative. The ruins we explored earlier no longer feel like endpoints, but like milestones along a long and continuous journey. The silence they hold is not empty. It is full of echoes, lessons, and possibilities. Each vanished civilization becomes a teacher, whispering across time about the importance of balance, flexibility, and connection. Their stories help us understand that fragility is not weakness, but part of the human experience, and that disappearance is not always tragedy, but sometimes transformation. As we near the end of this section, the path grows quieter. The mysteries we explored remain mysteries, and that is part of their beauty. They invite us to imagine, to wonder, to respect the unknowable. The reasons civilizations vanish cannot always be reduced to simple explanations. They are woven from countless threads, some visible, some forever hidden. What remains is the awareness that nothing humans build is permanent, not cities, not empires, not even memories unless they are tended carefully. Yet within this impermanence lies a profound sense of meaning. The very fact that civilizations rise and fall makes their achievements more precious. Their architecture, art, stories, and innovation stand as moments of brilliance in the long arc of time. Their disappearances remind us to cherish the present, to understand the value of cultural heritage, and to listen closely to the lessons left in the ruins. This bridge of understanding sets the stage for the final movement of our narrative, a closing reflection that gathers together the mysteries, the history, the silences, and the echoes we have explored. With calm steps, we now transition toward the final section, where the documentary will gently settle into its concluding thoughts, offering viewers one last, soothing meditation on the ancient worlds that vanished and the wisdom they leave behind. As our journey comes to a gentle close, we find ourselves standing at the edge of time, looking back at the civilizations that once glowed brilliantly and then disappeared into quiet darkness. Their stories, whether carved into stone, hidden beneath jungles, or whispered through surviving traditions, remind us that history is not a straight line, but a vast landscape of rising and falling worlds. Each vanished society we explored leaves behind a soft echo, a reminder that even in silence, there is meaning. In the hush that follows their disappearance, we learn not only about their fragility, but also about our own. Throughout this documentary, we walked among ruins that were once full of life, imagining the footsteps, voices, and hopes of people who never knew their civilizations would one day become mysteries. Their sudden vanishing, whether through environmental shifts, conflict, migration, or enigmatic departures, teaches us that nothing crafted by human hands is immune to time. Yet there is comfort in this truth. It reminds us to appreciate the present moment more deeply, to value the cultures and stories we are part of, and to understand that change is not an ending, but a natural rhythm of existence. The ancient silence we encountered is not empty. It is full of lessons, urging us to listen closely. It teaches patience, reminding us that answers do not always arrive quickly or clearly. It encourages humility, showing us that even the greatest empires must eventually submit to forces beyond their control. And it sparks curiosity, the driving energy that keeps historians, archaeologists, and storytellers searching for clues hidden beneath soil, stone, and myth. Mystery is not a barrier to understanding. It is an invitation to explore, to imagine, and to keep asking questions. In the calm of night, when the world is quiet and our minds drift across distant centuries, these ancient civilizations feel strangely close. The people who live in them dreamed, feared, worked, and loved just as we do. Their cities may have vanished, but their humanity remains recognizable. By reflecting on their disappearance, we see our own world with softer eyes, with more gratitude, more awareness, and more respect for the delicate threads that hold societies together. As this final section settles into silence, let it be a peaceful one. The ruins we visited do not speak with sorrow, but with gentle wisdom. They remind us that history is vast, life is fleeting, and time moves forward whether or not we are ready for it. What matters most is what we learn, what we preserve, and how we carry the stories of those who came before us. And so, as the echoes of ancient worlds fade into the stillness of the night, may their mysteries linger in your thoughts, not to trouble your rest, but to enrich your sense of wonder. The civilizations may be gone, but their stories continue, carried quietly within all of us.